In this series, we're going to take a look at the shooting form of the WNBA three-point contestants. What better place to start than with Sabrina Ionescu, who just set the record for the best round in a three-point contest in WNBA or NBA history. As we dive into Sabrina Ionescu's form, we're going to start at the bottom, at her base and her lift. Initially, we note that her feet are a little bit beyond shoulder width apart. Every basketball player has been told their feet should be shoulder width apart, but in this case, she's got them a little beyond that. In fact, it looks like the inside of her feet are about lined up with the outside of her shoulders. We also notice that her feet are both pointed slightly in and are a little bit staggered with the right foot in front of the left foot. And though her toes are pointed slightly in, we also note that her feet are toward the left of the hoop. They're not lined up directly at the rim. Very standard stuff that's going to result in a good base to set up her shoulders for her shot. With regards to lift, there's no doubt that Ionescu is definitely a jump shooter. It's not a set shot, which makes her performance in the finals that much more impressive, as she jumped every single time she released. Speaking of her release, you'll note that she does release at the very peak of her jump, giving her maximum power. Also worth noticing is that she has a very minor lower body turn when she shoots. Like many jump shooters, her right foot finishes farther in front of her left foot than it started. It's also important to note that her feet finish nearer to the hoop than when she begins her shot motion. This slight move toward the hoop gives her the extra power to knock down those longer shots. To summarize her base and lift, Sabrina Ionescu staggers her feet so that her shoulders can sit comfortably above them, avoiding being too square to the hoop on her release. She uses a strong lower body to propel herself into the air to give her the ability to knock down really long shots with incredible accuracy and consistency. And she does a few things that are all her own but work for her, like pointing her toes slightly in, having her feet beyond shoulder width, and adding that little rotation with her right foot pivoting while her left foot stays more stationary. Ionescu is very fluid on her shot. She really doesn't have any pauses from the time when she picks up the ball until she releases it, so identifying her shot pocket is difficult. However, as we look closely, it is clear that she hits that magical 90-degree mark that coaches always want their players to get to. It's often taught that great shooters have to have their elbow over their knee and under their wrist when they shoot. Sabrina Ionescu doesn't really follow this. She does have her elbow over her knee, but her wrist is actually to the inside. The ball is lined up with her nose as she goes to release her shot. This is actually a very common technique that good shooters will have. It's not really what's taught, but it seems to be very effective for some of the greatest shooters of all time, Sabrina Ionescu being one. As she extends toward the hoop, we can see that her arm angle ends up being around 50 degrees. She's not pushing it out in front of her, but she doesn't have a shockingly high release either. We can see fairly clearly that the ball does come off of her index and middle fingers, and she has a very crisp and exaggerated follow through. When considering our guide hand, it's important that we slow it down, because at first look in real time, it kind of appears that Sabrina Ionescu tends to thumb the ball when she releases it, as her left hand does finish with her thumb toward the hoop. However, as we look, she actually pulls her guide hand off fairly early and releases it with only her right hand. The left hand does end up with the thumb toward the hoop, but is not playing any part in the release. It's just something that she naturally does. And after she's released the ball, the important thing to look at is the rotation. There's a little bit of side spin on her shot, just a small amount, which comes from her bringing the ball a little bit from her left back to the right as she releases it. It's nothing major and it's the same every time, but it's worth noting to all the young hoopers out there. As long as your shot is repeatable and you put in the practice, you can be really good with it. When you put all these pieces together, you end up with an all-time great shooter. Sabrina Ionescu is an absolute pleasure to watch shoot the ball. It's impressive that this isn't the only strong point of her game, and I hope every young hooper out there is watching what she does and taking away some lessons from it.